Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. Welcome back to the show, Keith. It's been a minute since we've sat down together to record a show, but here we are.
It has. It's been a few days.
And admittedly, I've been under the weather.
I was going to say one of us got COVID. I'm not going to name names, but it was one of us. I got hit by a truck last Friday, and the truck moved away, on Sunday night, and I started feeling better yesterday. So, it was kind of crazy, but here I am. Well, it's good to see you back on your feet and doing better. So,
yeah.
But we're here to talk some Seahawks football, specifically recent visits by players to the team. They're allowed 30 prospect visits. I've got 16 that they've used so far. I think you said you had 17, which means I'm missing one. We'll figure out who that is here in a few. But let's kind of see what we can find about all, any trends, anything that we're looking at and all that kind of stuff. So where do you want to start?
Well, here we are, 9 days away from the draft. I'm kind of getting excited about that. That's coming right around the corner. And basically every year, this time of the year, all the NFL teams start racking up all their visits into their headquarter building to get firsthand looks at these prospects without any other distractions around. They come in, they interview them. Sometimes they work them out, depending on exactly what their criteria is for each person. It's just kind of a unique window into the types of players that the Seahawks are looking for. In past years, as we've seen those lists, during pre-draft and then post-draft and go back and review them, there's always one or two guys, maybe even three out of that list that end up getting drafted or are part of that priority free agent class that comes in after the draft as well. So it's a good list to kind of get an idea exactly what they're thinking as far as the type of prospect at each position, and depending on how many players at position groups there are, you can kind of see a significant sort of idea of exactly what position groups they're focusing on.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was thinking, is that there are certain position groups that have been really heavily scouted with the visits this year, and I think that is telling, and it's one of those things that's important to look at, because that shows you what the team views as priorities, things they know they've got to go do. The other thing that's interesting here is that oftentimes, if a team feels like they've got a really good scouting report on a player, they won't bring him in for this. Usually that's so true. They've got questions that they want answered. And so you end up with a lot of small school guys or guys that had injuries they want to let their medical team check out, or for some reason there's just something like, hey, they use a different technique than what we use. We want to bring them in, work them out, see what they do. If they, we ask them to do what we want them to do. Do they look smooth and do they feel coachable and willing to learn and that kind of stuff? So that's usually part of it as well.
So a couple of things. Thanks for helping me a lot on this show, Keith, because brain fog is a real symptom of COVID, and I may get stuck on a few words now and again. Couple of things regarding team news before we get started on the list. Geno Smith was signed by the Seahawks this last week. His contract had a little snafu with the league. It didn't go through. They're going to redo it, resubmit it, but it's essentially a $3.5 million deal. It was initially reported as a $7 million deal without any details, and everyone was kind of freaking out about that, but it's actually 3.5 with 3.5 additional incentives attached to that as well. I assume that comes down to playing time and yards and Pro Bowls and all that kind of stuff that will add to that pile if he should be able to win the job and become a starter. I think those things start to kick in for him, which makes sense. And then today, DeMonte Casey, the safety previously from Dallas, before that with the Atlanta Falcons. So he's kind of followed Dan Quinn around a little bit, has come in to work out for the Seahawks today. I think that would be an excellent signing. He's a guy that's a 5-year veteran who started for the Cowboys last year again and has 12 career interceptions. And so he's kind of a ball hawk kind of a guy.
He's a guy who had some versatility, has the ability to play both positions, and not a Pro Bowl caliber guy, but definitely a good player, someone who will add some significant depth to the defensive backfield where they need it.
Yeah. All right. So let's get down on this list. I didn't put them in any particular order as far as position groups or so forth. I thought we just kind of run through them as I kind of came up on them.
Well, why don't we do this by position? Because
we can try. Because I don't have my list in that order, but you can.
I don't either, but it's scalable. So you're trusting that my eyes actually work. All right. Okay. One of the things that was interesting to me is that you look down the list, and a position that I didn't really expect them to scout heavily is wide receiver. And there's a bunch of wide receivers on this list. I think there's 4 out of the 16. There was only 3, but so we've got Samari Toure out of Nebraska, Christian Watson out of North Dakota State, and Derek Young out of Lenoir-Rhyne University. And was there? No, I guess it was only those 3. The other one's a cornerback. So, but still 3 out of 16. That's a significant portion for a wide receiver, which is a position that it kind of feels like the Seahawks are, for the most part, set at. They've got their top 4 guys. They've got a bunch of guys they like, and that are trying to fill out the 5th position on there and play some special teams. I was not expecting them to scout wide receiver this heavily.
Yeah, I thought maybe, the 7th round area of the draft is where the Seahawks would be kind of looking to plug a hole here as far as somebody that could play special teams. You mentioned that. I think that's the key here with these guys, or possibly undrafted guys like Samori Toure or Derek Young might be guys that you might be able to find after the draft, possibly in the 7th round there. But all 3 prospects have great size. 6'1" on Samori Toure, 6'5" Christian Watson. We can spend a little bit more time talking about him here in a second. And Derek Young from Lenoir-Rhyne, the acclaimed university, 6'2", 220 pounds, 78-inch wingspan with a 4.48 40. That's a pretty interesting prospect. But Christian Watson at 6'5", 211 pounds, 22 years old, ran a 4.36 40, 38.5 vertical. He's a 50-50 ball catcher, not a tremendous amount of experience, also playing at North Dakota State. So you're taking a look at that. But here's a prospect with a lot of upside, and everybody's got him at least going at the top half of the 3rd round, possibly even sneaking into the 2nd round. I'm not exactly sure what the Seahawks are thinking with this kind of a guy coming in, but they want to have some options, and if they pick up additional draft capital in the middle rounds, he could definitely be a guy that they just add and provides a hedge against DK Metcalf's contract situation.
Yeah, which is a whole nother topic that plays in here, because you're looking at around the league. You had the 2 big contracts this year, and now we're starting to hear there's like 4 or 5 other guys that are the number 1 receivers on their team that are talking about not playing and doing anything in the offseason program unless they get a new contract. And that just plays into, Metcalf's in the same situation as those guys. Is he going to come in and work out? Is he going to hold out? Is he what's his plan? We don't know yet. And I could definitely see them taking a wide receiver if they don't like the way that is building up to come out. So.
Yeah, interesting. All right. The next group that I'll throw out there is defensive end. Everyone knows that Seattle's going to be after an edge rusher, defensive end in this draft. I think that's probably a given. We just don't know at what level in the draft that happens. Prospects they're bringing in are Boy Mafe from Minnesota. We've talked a lot about him as far as the prospect in some of our mock drafts and other shows, highlighting him at 6'3.5", 255 pounds, runs a 4.53 40, 38-inch vertical with that huge wingspan. I think he would be an amazing outside linebacker there. Michael Clemens, Texas A&M, and let's see, you could probably add Cameron Good to that as a guy that would be kind of an edge Sam linebacker type. And then I just want to see if
Daniel Hardy out of Montana State is the last one. Another guy, pass rusher, long arms. Obviously Montana State's not going to go as high in the draft and that kind of stuff, but kind of in that same mold, guy that they're looking at as a pass rusher. They're looking at edge rushers to come in and help this team out.
Now, one thing that I will note is that we're not bringing anybody in that, at that number 9 selection in the first round that we're looking at. Some of those top flight guys that might either drop to us or guys in the early teens that might be available. So I thought that was kind of interesting and maybe telling that they don't want to give away their hand with that first selection there. But I thought that the Boy Mafe look at maybe that early 40 or 41 pick would be a real good fit for Seattle.
Yeah. And then, I'm looking at the next position group there being defensive back. And there's, that's an interesting group because you've got, guys like Dantel Williams out of Nebraska. You've got Percy Butler out of Louisiana Lafayette, Kalen Barnes out of Baylor, Cam Taylor Britt out of Nebraska. And then the big name out of all of them is Ahmed Garner, known as Sauce Garner. And Sauce out of Cincinnati is a guy that's looked as someone who will be picked anywhere between number 2 and number 10. So he was definitely brought in as someone they wanted to look at for that first round pick.
Right. Which I wouldn't be a hater. I mean, it would surprise me if they went defensive back early, but at the same time, when you're looking at the opportunity to draft a guy that's a perfect fit for Seattle, in that spot, that he would just be there for a long time and be kind of your back end weapon that you would have there at 6'2 3/4 with at 190 pounds, 33-inch arms. Wingspan is 6 foot 7 3/8. He's 21 years old. He runs a 4.4 240. The guy's just a shutdown kind of guy, press man, cover corner. He can cover in space as well. He recovers really well with that speed, fights for 50-50 balls. He's a, ball hawk kind of a guy. So I would love that pick, or Daryl Stingley as well. The guy from LSU is sitting there. Cam Taylor Britt is another guy that they're bringing in that would be kind of a second or third round option for them, probably third round, maybe even the fourth round. I'm not exactly sure where he's going to fall, but he has the skill set I think teams would covet. Seems like more of a third round player, but he also fits everything they're looking for as far as scheme diversity. A guy that can play in the slot and then do some outside stuff as well as maybe some free safety stuff in a too high safety scheme.
Yeah, and so looking at that list with the defensive backs, you got, Sauce Gardner, a guy that's going to go top 10, and then all the way down into guys like Deontel Williams out of Nebraska, who's more of a safety, who's probably going to go 6th round, and Percy Butler.
I really like his athleticism.
Who?
Yeah.
Williams or Butler?
Dante Williams.
Yeah,
that guy, and then the Rodney Thomas. I don't know if you mentioned that Rodney Thomas guy from Yale. I
don't believe I did.
6'2", 196 pounds, ran a 4.4 640 and a 41-inch vertical with a.
I think we just found the
7.02 cone.
I think we just found the player that is on your list.
He was a late ad.
Yeah,
Rodney Thomas.
There we go.
Late ad.
Yeah, so you look at guys. There's all the way from their first pick, top 10, down into the 7th round undrafted free agent. They are looking at guys at that position at every layer of this draft, meaning they know they've got to get at least one and they're looking at their options on who they want. Do they want
Yeah.
someone at the top of the draft who can start now? Are they okay getting someone in the middle who can start, but maybe won't be as ready, or and if they end up not, because the draft doesn't fall to them, they want to make sure there are guys later in the draft that they're ready for, to make sure that they get someone no matter what. And I find that to be very interesting.
I think one guy that we didn't mention, I don't recall if you mentioned him or not, is Kalen Barnes out of Baylor. The guy that ran the fastest 40 at the combine, that 4.23, they're bringing him in. So they want a guy that's got a lot of speed here, a guy that maybe can compete in the slot for them, in a kind of a smaller frame corner with good quick feet and special teams ability, all that kind of stuff. So he's got some upside as well. I noticed they brought in at least couple of offensive linemen, Keith.
Just two.
Before the tight end group. We can talk about Cole Strange coming in and Rasheed Walker, a couple players we've talked about a little bit on the mock draft shows. What do you think about that?
Well, they're both middle range guys. I mean, Penn State's Rasheed Walker is not an offensive tackle prospect that's getting a lot of talk, because he's not a guy he's going to come in and be your starting left tackle right away. And he's that lesser one. He might have to move inside. I think you start him at right tackle if you draft him. And then, with Cole Strange, I mean, he's a guy who played guard, but he projects as a center, doesn't have the longest arms. So you wonder a little bit about where he's going to go in the draft. I think he's going to go a little lower than his tape might suggest, just because teams want longer armed guys so they can get their hands on the defensive lineman before the lineman can, get into their pass rush moves. And Strange isn't that. So, but I still think, his tape's pretty good, even though Chattanooga, I'm expecting him to go, fourth roundish area. Neither of those guys are near the top of the draft. They're both middle round guys. And to me, that kind of points to that perhaps their strategy is looking at, they're going to go other positions early and try and, fill out the offensive line in the middle rounds, which, given their current state at offensive tackle, I'm not sure I'm excited about that strategy.
I mean, we've talked about two things already. We've talked about the idea that they've only used up 16 or 17 of these opportunities yet to interview players. And second, not to give away their hand too much.
Yeah. The other thing is that our list might be incomplete. There are guys that come and go, and nobody reports on them, so they don't get added to the list, but the team has seen them. They have talked to them. They've done stuff. They've worked them out. And we just don't have that list. So we don't know. Usually the big name guys, everyone's paying attention to, that kind of stuff. But, you got a guy from, some smaller school, Utah State or, Washington State, one of those kind of things. And where there's no blip on the radar. They come and go. And unless one of the reporters happens to be at team headquarters that day, that nobody sees them, and it just doesn't get reported. So we can, we probably won't get to 30, but that doesn't mean the team didn't use their opportunities.
In addition, they've already met with players at the Combine, as well as the Senior Bowl and the East-West Shrine Bowl, all that kind of stuff. So they've been in contact with some of these players that we're talking about, especially at the top of the draft that probably will not come in. One of the players I saw at the top of the draft, or at least in the middle of the second round, at least, would be Desmond Ritter, the quarterback out of Cincinnati. He's on their list, and I just kind of want to see what that says about what the Seahawks are looking at for prospects at the quarterback position. This is the only player that they've got coming in. I understand that I mentioned, the Combine and the Senior Bowl and so forth, that they've had conversations with some of the other top prospects as well. But this is the only guy that's coming into the building. So that'd be interesting to me.
Well, they did work out the guy from Liberty. Malik
Willis.
There we go. They worked him out during, I think it was one of either his pro day or like they went there, actually worked him out kind of one-on-one. So it wasn't, they didn't bring him in to the Seahawks facility, but they did get their evaluation done. Ritter, I thought
Caleb Canales did that.
Yep. And getting, Desmond Ritter in, I think was important because it was one of those guys that they missed at the combine and just didn't work out. This players can only meet with so many teams, and the Seahawks just didn't end up, meeting with him, but they brought him in like really early and got him in, got him worked out. He's a guy that should be available in round 2. And if they want to take a quarterback out of this draft, you either got to take Willis high in the first round, or you got to take Ritter, early round 2. And that's really about it of guys that this team should be looking at. And I mean, this is not a good quarterback draft. One of the things that I've heard, though, is, just listening to some of the other draft pundits out there, that teams are starting to talk up Desmond Ritter, and that his name keeps coming up as a guy that, because of it's more the intangibles, the leadership, the energy, the work ethic, that teams are starting to look at him as maybe being the number 2 quarterback, and not Kenny Pickett, and not, Matt Corral, or any of the other names that you might have heard. And so it seems that Ritter might be climbing up the board. And then the other part of it is that could just be a smokescreen, and teams trying to talk him up when they're planning on, they just want Kenny Pickett to fall to them or whatever. So we don't know, but his name does seem to be coming up more and more recently.
So a name that does come up for the Seahawks that I've been reading about over and over again is Matt Corral, just for a couple of the same reasons that you mentioned about Desmond Ritter, being a professional kind of guy, does well with his teammates, can make all the throws, kind of has the intangible stuff. Just a name to watch on the periphery of this thing. Mm-hmm. One thing that seasoned evaluator Tony Pauline says about Desmond Ritter, he said that just about all, quote unquote, the teams he's spoken to have first round grade on Ritter. Ritter could come off the board as early as number 20 overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers, quote unquote.
Actually, that would be a pretty good fit for him.
That would be a good fit for him.
I could see that. I am not as high on Matt Corral as I think other people are. I don't have a first round grade on him. I don't think he is a franchise quarterback. I think his ceiling is that of Tua, down in Miami. Just a guy that's he's got some athleticism. He can move around, but I know you said he can make all the throws. I'm not convinced that's true. I don't think he's got a big enough arm for the NFL. And I think that it's just, he looks like a career backup to me. And I wouldn't be real excited if Seattle drafted him.
I think it's more likely that Matt Corral is available at 40 than Desmond Ritter at this point. I think if teams want to get Desmond Ritter, I disagree with you just slightly, kind of almost based on what Tony Pauline is saying, where he's got kind of the inside scoop on where NFL teams think about Ritter. Mm-hmm. And I think that they may have to end up coming back up into the first round. If that's their guy and they need to go get him, they would do that.
That's what I was saying, is his name is coming up. I think he's rising. He's higher. The NFL values him higher than the draft media does.
And it's a positional group need situation. It's not necessarily like he would grade out in the second or third round last year. This year, he's grading out at the back end of the first, maybe early second, because there's just nobody else. And teams still have need.
If he was in last year's draft, he would have been the 7th or 8th quarterback.
Yeah. You could make a good argument for 5th.
He would not have any of the first round guys from last year. He would not have been above.
And Willis would still be above him. So yeah,
and Willis would be so those 5, and Willis would be 6. So he'd be 7. And then it depends on Kenny Pickett where you have him. So he's either going to be the 7th or the 8th best quarterback in last year's draft. That will tell you where he's at. Like, yes, he's going to be a name, and he's going to be someone that a team's going to get, and their fans are going to get excited about him. But let's remember, a year ago, he would have been the 7th or 8th best quarterback.
Only one of the quarterbacks taken last year have really kind of turned out so far. So we'll see how that list evolves over time. let's keep going down this list. See who we come up to next. Did we mention the safeties? We mentioned the safeties.
Yep.
Okay.
The only other one is the tight end.
Yeah.
That Armani Rogers out of Ohio. And
Cade Otton has met with the Seahawks, I understand, as well.
Okay.
Just it didn't count on the 30 because he's a local prospect.
Because he's a local. Yeah.
Yep.
So it is a little weird to me that they're looking at tight ends. They've got 3 on the roster. They went and they brought one in that is a Pro Bowl caliber player that came in the Russell Wilson trade. They spent a bunch of money, I think too much, to re-sign their inline blocker and Will Disley.
Weird. That was weird, Keith. It was like they were competing against themselves and they just outsmarted themselves with like a $3 million surplus contract to a guy that they just didn't need to pay that much to. Yeah. I don't kind of get it, but maybe something was going on that I don't know about. They say there was other competition. I don't necessarily believe that anymore from John Schneider, because he says that about a lot of things that end up being elevated for him. And so I'm not sure, but anyway.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see. And then, of course, they've got their 6'7" mountain that we're still waiting to see if anything comes from on there. So they're 3 deep at, they're 3 deep at tight end. And if you bring in a guy, if you go out and you bring in a guy like Armani Rogers, you're basically saying you're going to cut someone. And is it going to be the guy you insisted on getting in the Russell Wilson deal? Is it the guy you just spent a bunch of money to re-sign, or is it Parkinson, the guy that you've been hyping for the last 2 years, but because of some injuries and, they just haven't been able to get on the field? Which, are you really planning on cutting one of those guys? Or are you drafting someone who therefore is probably not going to make the team?
Well, I think that Cade Otton's probably not the guy. I think they just brought him in as a courtesy situation to kind of keep track of him in the league as time goes on, because you're exactly right. So, and Cade Otton's the kind of guy that's kind of a Will Disley replacement. He's a 6'5", 250-pound jack of all trades type of tight end that can do inline and catch the ball for you a little bit. Armani Rogers is an interesting name out of Ohio U. Is a 6'5" and 226 pounds with an 80-inch wingspan, around a 4.75 40. He's age 24 though.
Is he a slow wide receiver or is he a tiny tight end?
Right. Yeah. So, that would be kind of a undrafted free agent option, I think, for him to come in. And you're hedging maybe against like a Noah Fant contract year situation. They don't know exactly what they're going to have in Noah Fant. This is his year to kind of play for his future here in Seattle. So we'll see. Anything else?
No, man, that's the list.
There's a linebacker, Cameron Good, out of California. Did you mention that?
We did. We mentioned him with the defensive ends.
He's interesting because he's got 7.5 sacks in 2021, tied with the in the Pac-12 for the sack leaders last year, and he's just an interesting player that I really haven't looked at very often.
He's listed as linebacker. I see him as a 3-4 outside linebacker. I don't know if he has the size to come up, put his hand on the ground, and be a 4-3 defensive end, which is why I think that he's listed as a linebacker. But if you're playing a 4-3, do you want him dropping back into coverage a lot and doing the other things that an outside linebacker's got to do? In that, I'm not convinced that's a good fit for him either. So he's kind of that tweener prospect. But as a 3-4 outside linebacker, I mean, he's built for that position.
I can guarantee you that they probably brought him in to see how well he does on agility and dropping back into coverage and see if he can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, because if he's just been going forward on tape at Cal, they might want to see how he does backpedaling and, in person. So
he'd be interesting. I wouldn't mind. I mean, outside linebacker in a 3-4, you bring a linebacker on every play, and it's not a blitz because you want to bring 4, right? So you bring your 3 defensive linemen and one of your linebackers. So he could come up and rush the passer on almost every play and still be a linebacker. And that would be kind of a fun fit. Although you really want Darrell Taylor being that guy who is going to get after the quarterback on almost every play from that outside linebacker spot.
So I got a fun little question for you. So we're on the eve of the NFL draft. It's next week. Next week we'll do a couple shows, kind of a draft primer show, and then we'll do our final mock draft. I just kind of want to take your temperature right now as far as what they've done in the offseason. Obviously, they moved away from Russell Wilson this year. They got some draft capital back that kind of made the draft a little bit more interesting for us, although it'd be a lot more interesting for me if we still had Russell Wilson, but that's a done deal. The ship has sailed.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've got that draft capital. How do we do in free agency overall? Where do you see the team sitting, draft strategy, all that kind of stuff, kind of put it all together?
I still think this is a roster that is not good. Has a lot of holes. They still are lacking greatly at cornerback and offensive tackle. They don't have a quarterback. The offensive line, just in general, no one's excited about, because sure, they went and not signed a center, but he was a guy that didn't play last year, and so it really comes down to, I mean, what are they going to do? How are they going to move the ball? They don't have a running back that's dependable. They don't have a quarterback.
Offensive tackles.
They don't have a quarterback that can get the ball to their two elite wide receivers. They don't have offensive tackles that can block for either the running game. I look at this roster and I see a lot of holes, and I look at on the defensive side, I still think they are they need a playmaker up front on that in their front three, and they need a playmaker on the back end at cornerback. And if they don't get both of those, this defense is not going to be good enough to carry this team. It might be good, but it's not going to be good enough to carry a team that has no offense like the Seahawks currently don't.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. If Russell Wilson was still here, this would be the team, minus Noah Fant, that we have, and it's kind of empty. It really is, especially at the offensive line area. If you take a look at Stone Forsythe and Jake Curran, I mean, come on, those guys might be fine prospects, but they're just unproven. They're not ready to go day one. If we do throw them out there day one, they're going to get beat. They're going to look awful for a while. Maybe a rookie that comes in, even a first round pick, wouldn't be an immediate upgrade, but it would be at least some future there. Gabe Jackson's, had an okay year last year. Damian Lewis had an okay year last year. He wasn't standout. I think he played better as a rookie. And so you just kind of have to figure that out. And then at center, it's kind of a hot mess as well with Austin Blythe. I think that he's probably able to play. I think that he'll be okay. He's a little undersized, he's kind of that zone guy. I think he'll run the offense really well in there. Probably slight upgrade over Posick, but maybe not. And then, of course, our wide receivers, we didn't know what Dwayne Eskridge was last year. We still don't know what he really can do for the offense. We're just kind of waiting to see that. Freddie Swain had an okay year. After that, it's just a bunch of guys. And Chris Carson, Rashad Penny. I mean, there's our running back room. After that, it's basically void. I mean, you got DJ Dallas, but come on. So I do see them drafting a running back. I see them drafting a tackle or two. And possibly a center,
or tackle and a center.
Yeah.
They probably need a wideout later in the draft. In there, I mean, they're good at tight end. They're good at guard.
Yeah,
and they're good at the top couple wide receivers.
Yeah,
that's it on offense. The offense is the roster is not great,
and they need a quarterback. I mean, the biggest position of all. And they likely won't address it this year because the value just isn't there. It's better for the team, and we've talked about this many times, for them to build around the rest of the roster, because the roster is so void of talent. They've literally got 5 or 6, 7 different position groups they could draft at, and they would still be light. And so they're 2 drafts away, essentially, this draft and next year's draft, from completing this roster.
And this is what I've been advocating for since the trade, is that, go get a offensive tackle early in the draft, or a cornerback early in the draft. So a true like guy that can be a difference maker a year from now. Load up on, getting young talent in and filling some of those holes, building the rest of the roster, knowing that those guys are going to be rookies and they're going to make mistakes, and this roster is going to continue to be bad all year. And then you're going to be, a 3 or 4 win team, and you're going to be in position to go draft a CJ Stroud, that someone that you can build around for the future at quarterback. And I think if they can put themselves in position where it's a 1 down year, and then they go get their quarterback of the future, they're doing it right. I mean, it's unfortunate that the team has to make this 1 bad year and have that, but they have enough draft capital this year to fill in a lot of the roster. And then next year you go get your quarterback and you fill in whatever else you need. And you've got a young, hungry team a year from now going into the 2023 season and ready to compete. And that's the path this team needs to take. And I'm worried that Pete Carroll and company are going to screw this up by winning a couple too many games and getting themselves where they're not in position to go draft a quarterback. And they're going to have to lose a bunch of draft capital trading up if they want one.
Yes. Because there's 5 or 6 teams that are quarterback needy that are heading into next year that are probably going to still be quarterback needy. And unless, we luck out and the top 2 losing teams don't need quarterbacks for whatever reason, and we can get up there, it's going to be expensive. It's just going to be what it is. I think you're going to have to mail in your draft next year, and you've got 2 firsts and 2 seconds. You might need all of that to move up even 4 spots, 5 spots in the draft to get up in the top 3 and get a guy, because that's what it's going to take.
And that's my point, is why give up, that extra 3 picks, your 2 seconds and your second first in order to move up and get that quarterback. Or you could just your roster is terrible. So just make sure that you lose and you're in position where you don't have to give up anything. You're already in that position. You still have your other first, you still have both your seconds. You use that to load up your roster, and you get yourself ready to compete with it. And that's my fear, is that this team is going to win now, even though with a roster that's not good enough to do anything with, and they're going to end up at 7 wins and be outside where they have to give up all those extra players and picks in order to get the quarterback that they need, rather than admitting that their roster is crap and finishing with 3 and being able to just draft their quarterback.
As you know, Keith, it's really hard to predict. A, this time of the year. B, it's just hard to expect your team to lose on any given Sunday or win on any given Sunday. And it's with this roster, they do have a shot at 5 wins or less, but they also have a shot at 8. It's just one of those things, depending on how the draft goes and how Drew Lock plays. And
what's the point? What's the point of winning 8 games?
Well, the point of winning 8 games is you would go into the offseason with 2 firsts and 2 seconds to help build that roster, and you might have some momentum to climb up a little bit.
But you can't go from 8 wins to 12 and being a Super Bowl contender without a quarterback. And
but if your quarterback showed enough, I'm just saying. I'm not necessarily saying Drew Lock's going to be the deal or whatever, or Geno Smith for that matter. You know what I'm saying, though, Keith, right? It's
the difference between 5 wins and 8 wins is nothing for the future of the team in a positive way, but it is a lot for the future of a team in the negative way.
Right. But hold on. What if Drew Lock, I'm just saying, what if Drew Lock ends up throwing for like 3,800 yards, 25 touchdowns, only 11 interceptions, and they move the ball and they win some games and they look halfway decent, at least halfway through the season. They won more than they lost heading into the offseason. It might change. I'm just saying, it might change the way that your outlook looks towards what's the next step.
Because fool's gold. Because Drew Lock is not taking you to a Super Bowl. he might come in and run the offense and game manage his way into some reasonable stats and whatever. But at the end of the day, it's fool's gold because he isn't a franchise quarterback. And you know it. No matter what stats he puts up next year, he's not a good player.
I want to see it.
He's lost his job twice already.
Yeah, I know. And I want to see it. His situation, I really do believe this. His situation in Denver was less than optimal. His offensive coordinator changed over. You know, I want to see it. I just want to see it. And I think that he should be given a fair shot. And I don't know that we should definitely be writing him off before he even takes a preseason snap. I mean, it's just one of those things where I think that
he has taken a preseason snap. He's been in the league for 4 years.
So here's the deal. We either have to allow our evaluators to say we're going to give him a shot because we believe in him, or the scenario plays out where we win 3 games and we go get our guy next year. And one of those two things is going to be real, or both of them are going to be realistic. I don't know. All I know is Drew Lock is you know, penciled in as the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. You can say Geno Smith could get that job, and that's possible. But
it's worse.
Somebody is going to quarterback this team
even if
this year
Geno
and
Smith,
may surprise.
If Geno Smith comes in and wins the job for this team, it's worse. That's worse for this team because he's
True.
how old? He's how old now? We've seen him. We saw him last year come in and stink up the joint and be unable to score 10 points when the team needed him to in a game so that they could win and keep their playoff chances alive. We know he's not a good player. If he comes in and wins the job at his age, there's no future for Seattle with him at quarterback. So there's no upside. There's none.
So your worst possible fear is purgatory, which is the 7 to 9 win territory for this team.
Yeah. I mean, you're looking at,
because you could be a 7 to 9 win team for the
forever,
next 4 or 5 years. Right.
Yeah. You could be Minnesota that has Kirk Cousins and he's okay and he can win them some games, but they end up in that 7 to 9 win range. And sometimes they sneak in as one of the last playoff teams. And sometimes they, like last year, where they don't make the playoffs at all, but they're never in position to get a quarterback. And they're kind of just stuck.
Oh, it could be even worse than that, Keith. It could be a situation where we're San Francisco, or we're, another team that has, 10 starting quarterbacks in the last 9 years. We could be that, and we could, we were that before Russell Wilson came along. I mean, granted, we had Hasselbeck and so forth, but before that, we struggled for a long time as a franchise to find anybody that could take the job for longer than 2 or 3 years. I agree with you for the most part. I just think that I've got a little bit more flexibility there on Drew Lock, just because he's a young prospect. He does have some tools. I think that his situation granted him a little bit of leeway.
How old is Drew Lock?
I think he's 24.
Sure about that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. He's a young guy. So I just kind of want to see. I kind of want to see for my own eyes in our offense,
Shane
Waldron's offense.
He's 25. He'll be 26 next year. So that'll be his 26 year.
Yeah. So this is the year for him. It's either do or die. So what I'm saying is, I just want to see what we've got in that, and likely it won't work out. Maybe it does. If it doesn't, that points to a losing season, and I think we'll be in a position to take care of that next year somehow, some way. Whether it's a trade with that draft capital plus Drew Lock. Drew Lock played for a year, maybe he played halfway decent, but we still lost a bunch of games. You package Drew Lock.
He'll be a free agent.
2 first rounders, 2 second rounders.
Lock will be a free agent. He's not part of any package.
Okay.
So
you know what I'm saying? We've got a few options next year. We could go trade for a guy that's in the trade market. We could acquire a free agent quarterback next year. We could draft one. So, I mean, there are some options next year to kind of address that, and we'll just kind of have to cross the bridge when we get there.
So,
but I think I agree with you.
You want this team to win 7 games and then sign Sam Darnold.
I agree. I'm not even going to answer that. I agree with you.
I mean,
that
that's the free agent
that's
market.
not what I'm advocating. That's not what I'm
free
advocating.
agent market.
Let's cross the bridge when we get to it. We'll see what happens. But what I'm saying is I agree with you in that I don't think there's a quarterback this year that could come in and really kind of take over the franchise and be that guy. I think whoever we brought in, if we did, would likely, sit a year or half a year and kind of see where we're at. But I do think the solution comes in 2023 based on the rest of the roster needing so much work and development. I think you kind of invest now this year in the trenches and get the team ready to go in 2023. I do think that we're going to lose more games than Pete Carroll probably thinks he wants to win, because it's just the way that the roster is built. We just are talent deficient in a lot of different ways. It's going to be a young, exciting group this year. We're going to get an infusion of 4 or 5 draft picks that are, high draft picks where they're going to get some heavy rotation and so forth. So I think it'll be an exciting year to kind of individually evaluate different players and so forth. But as a team, I think it'll be a tough slog.
I think the offense is going to be tough to watch. I actually have some hope on the defensive side. I think there's, especially with Shelby Harris, I think people have overlooking his addition at defensive end. And, you've got Taylor and Robinson and some of these guys that are really growing into their roles and all that kind of stuff. I think that there's some talent on the front seven of that defense. I think that the defense is actually going to be all right. If they get a top cornerback, if Sauce Gardner falls to them and they get that, I think the defense could actually be really damn good. Yeah,
you add like a Jermaine Johnson on the edge to this defense, or a Sauce Gardner on the edge on the corner.
Or Jordan Davis right in the middle.
Oh my goodness, Jordan Davis, dude. I honestly think Jordan Davis in this draft is underrated a little bit.
He is. He seems to be dropping back down. Like people just are forgetting about him.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that he's got the way that he was used in Georgia. And I keep bringing this up. He was used as a nose tackle, and the guy's got 3 tech written all over. I know he's 345 pounds, but his skill set says 3 tech.
Oh yeah,
and I think that he can move around that line a little bit, and just you can stunt him and all sorts of stuff and take advantage of his like burst and his quickness and his just power. And I think that he would end up being a kind of a difference maker for this defensive line.
And so the defense, I think, can be competitive. I think the defense is going to be better than a lot of people think. I just think the offense is going to be so bad it's not going to matter that much. And that's very frustrating, given this has been a team that has had parts. They were missing some offensive linemen and a running back. Otherwise, the offense could have been really special last year. And now we're looking at an offense that's going to be one of the worst in the NFL. And it's a defense that's ready to win. So interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there is a chance. There is a chance that the offense ends up being better than you think. They address, Brown comes back on a 1-year deal at tackle. Maybe they get a right tackle in the draft. They get a premier edge rusher, maybe one of the top 3 or 4 running backs to come in, maybe a center in the 4th round. That comes in and earns a starting spot, maybe. And there's just, there's opportunities to improve a little bit on the offense before the season starts, and we'll see kind of how it lands. But I still get your point. I don't want to win 7 games. That's the worst. I either want to go all in and surprise everybody and win 11 or whatever, or I want to win 3.
I either want that situation where you just said, where you get a running back and a tackle, and an edge rusher and a cornerback, and you get enough in there where you can win 11 games because the defense is good enough to carry you, and you don't need much from your quarterback.
Right. Right.
And I want them to either do that, or I want them to be bad and win 3, because 7 wins, it just sets your franchise back. It's not better than 3. It's worse than 3.
Yeah. And you can make an argument that this division got better. I mean, without the Seahawks.
I don't think I can make that argument.
I think the draft needs to happen, and then I think
we'll see.
We'll see. Anyway,
because I think every single team took a step back this offseason so far. We'll see how I feel after the season. The Seahawks were in 4th place last year, and they took the biggest step back. So now they're way back of everyone. But I think all 4 teams took a step back this offseason.
Yeah, and that power, I think, went to the AFC West.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get out of here. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. And thanks for the debate, by the way. You won the debate. I just said all that stuff because I needed to keep it going a little bit.
I didn't win anything.
You only win if the team wins, right? Okay.
Yep.
You can find me at NWC Hockey Shows at Hawks Playbook. You can find us on our favorite podcast platforms and YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. Tell your friends. Until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWCHawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.